afternoon and welcome to this live webinar. If you are with me and you can see me, hello to you. How are you doing this beautiful Thursday afternoon? Sorry, we had to move the session by an hour today, and because we had something that came up and we couldn't go live at the appropriate time. We are sorry about that. So let's jump right into our conversation for today. And today we are looking at something very significant, a topic that is really very significant. We're looking at beyond the back of a book or beyond the cover of a book. What is important? We want to look at some important things that as parents you want to pay attention to. We want to give you a guide or some sort of a framework to use when you are choosing the right books for your child. You want to choose books that will help your child's brain development. You want to choose books that will impact your child. You want to choose books that are not just for entertaining your children, as many of us do. We want to start introducing our children to the right kind of literature as early as possible. My name is Maribeth Chima, and I am the founder of the Parenting Through Mentorship Academy, PTM Resources, and of course, the matron of the Mastermind Circle. And today we are talking about books. We are talking about picking the right books for our children beyond the cover of the book. I dare say beyond the noise that people make around or about the book that we see around us. If our children are going to read books, then we might as well get them to start reading the right books as early as possible. So, by virtue of the work that I do, right, one of the things you hear parents say or you hear people say when you talk about books, because of course I'm an author and I write books for children. I'm reading, I'm learning bedtime stories for champions right here. That's one of the series, one of the 4 series that I write, right? And what you hear when you talk about books and telling parents to introduce their children to books early is, why do I have to bother buying books for my 1-year-old, my 12-month or 8-month-old child, when all they do is tear the books? So parents somehow, all right, a lot of people do not understand that there is no better time to buy books or to have your children, start reading or starts interacting with books. Why is this? Because, dear parents, by the time your child is about 3 years old, 90% of the child's brain development is already complete. Yes. So when children read books at age 0, 1, 2, 3, it's not about them. It's not about the letters. It's not about them understanding the letters or knowing how to blend the words. That's not the idea. That's not the goal when children read books at age 1 or age 2. So when I hear parents say things like, oh, my child is only 2 and she can read 10 letters, that's not the goal. That's not the goal. So don't bother sitting down there and struggling and forcing your 3-year-old to read 4-letter words, 3-letter words. That's not the essence of having children read that early. The essence of having children or introducing books to children that early is to help them to start developing the neural pathways in the brain that connects the child to this activity. You want the children to cultivate a love for reading, isn't it? You want the children to internalize the need to read. You want the children to start building confidence. You want the children to start taking initiative. You want the children to start learning how to problem solve. You want the children to start learning how to build their imagination and creativity. That's what you are doing. You are creating the neural connections and the neural pathways that will make this activity normal to your child. You are actually building the foundation for your child's success 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. So introducing your child to reading early is not about them knowing how to blend words or knowing how to read two-letter words, three-letter words, as we like to think. Okay, you want to build the foundation for success. You want to build the foundation for smartness. You want to build the foundation that the child needs to actually develop those reading skills that they will need later, not now. So introducing reading early or introducing children to books early is building a solid foundation for learning. You want to raise children who love and enjoy learning and do not just learn because they want to you want to pass an exam or they want to, have high grades and all that. If you're going to raise a child who enjoys learning and reading for reading's sake, then you need to help them cultivate the love for reading and for learning as early as possible. And the ages between 0 to 3 are the absolute best time for you to do this. All right, so let's look at 5 dangers of not introducing books to your children or to our children as early as possible. Vocabulary poverty. That's number 1. Okay, we've talked about this so many times. I'll just brush through this because this class is supposed to be a really brief one. Okay, if a child's space is empty of books between 0 to 3, their face, basically, if books are not put in front of the child, then the child does not resonate with books as something that should be in their environment, right? So the child struggles with a lot of things, including expressing themselves when they do not get into that space where they learn how to express themselves. And books are one of the most one of the biggest ways to teach children how to express themselves. When children begin to experience and encounter the character of a book and the characters in books and the different ways that these characters express themselves, what you're doing is you are enhancing the child's ability for expression as early as possible. So we said vocabulary poverty. Children who are not reading books do not hear as many words as a child who is reading books. So when you introduce your children to books early, you introduce them to a wide range of vocabulary. You help them build language as early as possible. You introduce them to varying emotions as early as possible. You introduce them to varying environments, scenes, locations, as many as possible. Because when a child is reading a book, for instance, is reading about animals, the child is reading about that whole animal habitat, and what happens in the animal world. So the child gets to know things like the forest, he gets to know things like the ocean, he gets to know all of these things. And the moment children experience this becomes a part of the child's experience. The neural pathway that connects this as one of the things that the child now knows is already created. So the children begin to build, or you who is supporting the child can now build on this knowledge that the child already has. And that's how you see a child at 1 has been introduced to this experience already, or this many experiences already. So the neural pathway that connects the child understanding this part of the world or this area, this thing, this part of whatever it is that they are reading about is already there, as opposed to a child who has not encountered these things at all, because all that the child is introduced to are the basic things in the child's environment beyond books, beyond the extra things that they learn and they get exposed to through books. So what this child who is a bookie or who has been introduced to books, the things that he has experienced, the things that he has seen, the things that he has met in those books, the child that is not introduced to books doesn't get those experiences. So he is limited. So let's go back to vocabulary. So because the child reads, different kinds of books, varying books, right? What happens is the child experiences more and more vocabulary, a wider range of vocabulary. So that's why usually I would say to parents, don't just say, okay, don't just read books to your children once in a while, right? actually put a budget on books. Yes, the way you put budget to buy diaper. I wrote a post the other day and I said the way you have a budget to buy diapers, you buy diapers for your children. It's not negotiable, isn't it? The way we put a budget to buy clothes for them is not negotiable. Okay, maybe clothes for some people it's a little more, for some it's less. The way you put a budget for food, especially for diaper, right? Put a budget like that for books, right? So that it becomes a fixed thing in your home, so that it becomes something that you started, dear parents, you prioritize. So your child is expectant, or when they see a book, as much as they are when they eat something, a treat and something like that. I tell people my children are excited about getting new books as much as they're excited about getting a box of pizza. Why is that? Because the books have always been a part of their lives. Books have always been a part of their surprises. So it's a birthday, it's everything else and a book. It's Christmas, it's everything else and a book. It's whatever it is you're celebrating, is everything else and a book. And then they've always had a budget for books, such that even now that they are 17, almost 17 and 11, our children, would actually say to you, I have not bought my books for the month. And it gets so interesting that at 16, our son would actually take from his pocket money and buy a book that he really wants to read for himself, even if it's as expensive as 6K, 8K, 10K. He's ready to go all the way. Keep this for me. He's ready to go all the way, provided it's a book that he wants to read. How did we get here? It's because books have been prioritized from the earliest time in his life. So he does not think that there is any amount that is too much for him to buy a book. I remember one time we were at the airport, right? And he had gone to take a stroll. Our flight was delayed, you know how it happens. So our flight was delayed and we're in the lounge, and he went out to, look around, just walk around and all of that. He saw a book vendor and all that, came back and asked if he could, no, he had his ATM card. And then he went ahead and bought the book. He went ahead and bought the book and then came back and showed me it was something about Elon Musk. He wanted to read about Elon Musk and all that. So I asked how much was the book, and he told me it was 7K or something like that. I'm like, Mugbe, as I don't understand, he's selling a 7K book. Me, I don't even sell 7K books. Let me go and see, And so we went to the lady that was selling the books and all of that. But he had already bought the book, and I did not make big of it. I didn't go like, oh, you were cheated or anything like that. For me, my take home was, oh, he didn't think that taking his whole 7,000 naira, I think something there, 6 or 7,000. So it was high, it was on the high side, So for me, it was like he didn't think it was too much for him to take his 6K, even if it's 4K, to buy a book. I was just going to leave him with that, So in my head, it was between me and the girl. I don't understand why this one had to sell, but whatever it is, but for me, it was a huge one that day. So our children will only get there. Our children will only prioritize these things if we have prioritized them first. Okay. So yes, your child's vocabulary store is going to be wider if the child reads. And for a child who doesn't read, there will be vocabulary poverty, as I call it. They start school struggling with expressing themselves, understanding the teacher, understanding, context, when they even read or when they read books. When they listen to people who have depth, when they listen to real issues, they cannot navigate because they don't have that depth. A child who reads book has more depth than one who doesn't. I say it as a teacher in the classroom. I say this many times. When you meet a child in your classroom from a home where book is a thing, you can tell there is a difference between that child. Their comprehension skills, it's not the same at all. The way they relate to comprehensions, the way they relate to passages, the way they relate to learning as a whole is different. And you find out that the child who comes from a background where books is a thing, who reads, a lot and all of that, The child is usually more participatory in a class. Children who read books don't just keep quiet in class. They always have something to say. And that's because their knowledge bank is huge. So there's always something in that store of knowledge, because reading broadens your mind and widens your horizon and gives you knowledge of different things. I love it when there's a scene that I love to watch when our son and my husband engage in conversations on particular issues. I love to watch them. I love it when I see children engage adults. So I like it when they engage adults. I like it when I see children speaking to adults and they're able to meet them at a level, because they have, because their knowledge has got depth. And most times it comes with children who read books. Very, very key. Number 2, the textbook shock. Okay? The textbook shock. When books are introduced late, children associate them only with strict schoolwork, textbook, exam. So for some of our children, the only thing that the only thing or the only time that book is a thing is a book from school. It's usually just textbooks and all of that. So apart from that, they have no business with books. They have no association with books. As we speak, if I ask you, there's so many of us here that our children do not even have a library. No, ask yourself, does your child have a library? Does the child have a library of their own? Right? Can your child boast of 10, 20 books that belong to them? And now this is it's not bragging rights now. No, it's not bragging rights. We don't brag with things like that. We brag with things like, clothes and things like that. But the truth about it is, if you have a 3-year-old and she doesn't already have a library, then you are shortchanging that child, dear parents. Not to talk of if you have a 10-year-old or a child who's older than that. Let your children build their own library. We come back to the same. Create a budget for books. Be the reason why your children build a connection with books. Don't let the only time that your children think or talk about book be their textbooks. So that's why even with the textbook, they don't own it. They treat the textbook as if it is punishment. They treat the textbook as if it is a chore. They treat reading as if it's something that you do because your life is not fun, or because your life is not adventurous, or because you are not having fun. So that is the reason you will be in your home and your children will be reading, or you ask your children to read, or your children are reading, and there are certain guests that will come to your home and they will tell you, I beg, let these children rest. Because if most children were watching TV or playing, this guest will probably not say to you, let the children rest. I can tell of many scenes or scenarios where, you're on vacation or you're out with other family members, maybe during the festive period, and your child takes a break to read a book, or your child takes a break to do something productive. And you can see them look at you with that eye, like, I beg, these children are on holiday, let them rest. Like, because somehow holiday is associated with you not reading a book, or because, of course, the book is seen as a chore. The book is seen as something that is not fun and is not exciting. But little do they know that for some children, picking a book and reading is actually the real fun. For our daughter, picking a book and reading is the real fun. So if you want to, if you want to give my daughter like the biggest consequence is for you to take her books out of her room, because I have to do that sometimes. So sometimes when she is not doing what she's supposed to do, or when she is not prioritizing the things that are important for time, you have an exam and you would rather finish a series. You have an exam or you have to do something and you have a class to attend and you would rather just snuggle in your room and read a book. So no, I'm going to take the books out of your room. So anytime, because she has a library in her room, she has, books by the side of her bed and all of that. And then there's the family library. So anytime you are beginning to do too much, I will just empty the books from the side of your bed, empty the ones that you love from your library, and take it back, where you have to travel all the way to go and pick it. And she doesn't like that, So let your children associate themselves with books. And let those people who keep telling you let your children rest when they are reading books, tell them to get them behind you, right? Because these are the people that are confusing people. Books are not a chore. Books are not a chore, and school book is not all that book is about. Okay, children learn to hate reading because they feel that reading is a chore and not a lifestyle. You want to raise your children to see reading as a lifestyle. It is part of who we are. Rather than go to bed after watching a movie, why don't you teach them, or why don't you raise them to go to bed after reading a book? If you want to tell that our daughter is ready to retire for the night, you would see her take a book probably from the library, from the family library, and she's walking over to her room. You know that, okay, it's good night. And the next thing you hear is, Mommy, would you read a story to me? Or can you come, let's read, let body read, or are you going to come for pillow talk? Something like that. So teach your children to wind down with books. Teach your children to prioritize books. Teach your children to make books a part of their life. And it begins right from age 0. Okay? We're looking at, beyond the cover of the book, what kind of books should our children be reading? But I mean, we couldn't just jump into that without understanding the disservice you do to your children when they are not reading at all. Delayed attention span, that's number 3. In a world that is full of screens and tablets and all of that, in a world where the distraction is humongous, you want to raise children who know how to stay on task, who know how to finish the things that they start. You want to raise children, right, who can sustain their attention for some time. And for little ones, a good way to train attention span is to introduce them to reading, amongst other things like, building blocks, Lego, and things like that. Jigsaw puzzle. But reading is one of the ways to help your children develop or expand their attention span. Very important. A child who doesn't experience book early will struggle to sit still. A child who doesn't experience books early will struggle to focus and to listen to instructions. So books will actually teach your child. Have you seen a 12-month-old, 18-month-old who is interested in a particular kind of book? That's why the kind of books that your children read at this time or this early stage is very important. We're going to come to that, right? So because the child's learning is highly sensorial in the first 3 years, 5 years of their lives. So children their attention can be sustained when they have something that they are doing that engages their senses. So if your child gets attracted by, a particular book, could be the shape, could be the texture, could be something. Have you seen a child who is transfixed in a book like that? They could be there for a whole 10 minutes without even knowing it. They could be there for a whole 10 minutes. As a child does that, as you introduce books over and over, and the child is engaged with books or in the books like that, over and over again, that's how they are training their attention span, because attention is actually trained. Okay, so it's a good way. Emotional disconnection. If you do not raise children with books, right, there's a chance of not having what to use to help them learn to regulate. So books will help your children, develop emotional connection, right? Books help toddlers to name their feelings. That's why. So I've just written 3 amazing books. I am so proud. Yes, I am so proud of myself. Sorry, I'm so proud of myself. Right? for writing those 3 books. So I've just written 3 amazing books. My first book for children 0 to 3 years old, you know. And in one of those books, I talked about it's all about feelings, where your little child begins to learn about their feelings, right? In fact, all the group of children I wrote for this year, I wrote about feelings. Okay. Now, there's one of the books that said my feeling and I, right? My feelings and I, for the 0 to 3 year olds. Now, the little child is learning how to recognize and how to name, how to allow them cruise through their feelings, and how to say goodbye to the feelings. So in that book, the child gets to understand that there is nothing wrong with, having those big emotions. There's nothing wrong with having those feelings. But because we cannot keep your 1 year old, 2 year old and begin to teach them, there is nothing wrong with your feelings. Your feelings, no, we don't teach them that, right? So what have we done? We have created a book that the child can interact with, and the child can see feelings represented in colors, okay, and then the child can see what those feelings look like, and then the child can speak to themselves. Speak to themselves and speak to their friend. Okay, so the book is Look, Nini, Look. And it's about a little girl, Bami, and her toy, Nini. And so, because Nini is her friend, because Nini is her favorite toy, she's constantly trying to explain to Nini what she's learning in her environment. So you see, your child already is making or trying to make sense of their environment. That's what they do between 0 and 3. And as they learn and make sense of that environment, they want to share it. Yes. The child wants to share it with some other person. The child wants to enjoy it with some other person. And there she is. She has her mini toy, and she can turn and experience this environment, this new environment that she's learning about. She can turn and share it with Nini straight away. It's I said I am proud of these books, right? So yes, your toddler will actually learn about feelings through the character in the story. As I said at the beginning, when your child is reading between 0 and 3 or even 0 and 4, it's not about the letters. It's not about blending. It's not about understanding or explaining or understanding ABCD. That's not it. Please leave it alone. It's the child beginning to understand their environment. It's the child beginning to connect with their environment. It's the child developing neural connections. It's the child learning soft skills while reading that book. Attention span is being trained. Right, confidence is being built. The child is able to take initiative, right? So I say to parents, when you stack their book, your 1 year old should have a library, please, dear parents. And that library should be arranged in a way that the child can go and take the book by themselves. The child has got 4 books and he can go there, 10 books, and pick the one that he wants to read per time. That's the child already making informed decisions. The child is already choosing one out of a variety. And the child can decide, this is what I am interested in at this time. This is the child already building a sense of self. This is the child already becoming aware of themselves and their need per time. This is the child becoming aware of the things around them. See, parents, reading is one of the best gifts that you can give to your child as early as possible. You see that heritage they are talking about, store up an inheritance for your child. Please store inheritance through books for your child. You are actually exposing them to the world early, and you are helping the child find his place in the world. So when your child builds confidence early, the child is able to know who they are and is able to find his place take his own place in the world and then move from there. What do you think that purpose and all of these things that we're talking about, impact, confidence, boldness, where does it come from? It comes from how these things have been built from the foundation stage. And reading books, exposure through books is one of a great way to start this with your children. Very critical. So I said books will help your child to name their big feelings like anger, like sadness, without stories. I mean, without stories to guide them, they often display, or they often display tantrums, right? Because they lack the right words to explain their hurts and all of that. Through a character, and how a character has explained or processed their feelings, your child gets an example of how to also express their feelings. Because children end up mimicking the characters, right? Or acting out, concepts that they have learned through the characters in a book. That's why the kind of book that they are reading is very, very important also. See, I'm taking my time to explain these things because they are so important, right? And it's so important that we know these things, because when we have knowledge, then our children are we become an advantage to our children. All right, number 5 is missing the child. If your child is not reading, then the child is missing a chance to be creative. That whole creative spark is taken away from your child. Children who read books turn out to be very creative. Children who read books turn out to be problem solvers. Children who read books are exposed to different kinds of problems, right, in the character. Sometimes they are also trying to figure out a solution with the character in the book. Sometimes they watch the character figure out a solution, and it gives them a peek into how to solve that same kind of problem when they encounter them. Stories actually, start from a point and then they peak at some point, and then there are solutions to a problem in the story. And that's how you introduce your child to the process of problem solving, just because they are introduced to books. Okay, early reading fires up their imagination. Yes, because the child is exposed to different or varying things that probably in your immediate environment do not exist. Okay, very important. It fires up their imagination. Without books, a child's mind is only fed by passive screens. Some of us literally replace books with screens. And screens are not active learning, they're passive learning, right? They're passive learning, and your child is just sitting down there and being entertained. It actually does not trigger the kind of neural connections that's reading. When you do something, we say the hand is the tool of the brain, isn't it? So when the child is involved in an activity, right, it's from the hand to the brain, sort of, right? So the child is the brain's instrument, right? So when the child is engaged, that's what books do, especially if your child is reading the right kind of book. I said at this point, the children is a lot of sensorial learning that is going on. So as the child feels the texture of what they are reading, as they feel, as they touch, as they look, the colors and all of that, as they do all of that, as they look at the image, and they try to make sense of what it is that they are seeing in those pictures, as they try to connect the pictures to form a whole story in their head. Have you seen a toddler reading? The toddler just looks at the picture and creates his own story altogether, because their imagination is highly sparked and powered. As they do all of this, they are causing a lot of neural connection that will help them solve problems, that will help them build their confidence, that will help them believe in themselves, that will help them believe in their ability to create. You are building foundational skills when you help children do this. Very, very key. And so when they watch TV, it's not the same thing. It's highly passive. Slowing down their problem solving and critical thinking skills. That's what those screens do. It's just a whole lot of dopamine being pumped in your child, and the child is just hyperactive from those, from the endless passive entertainment or passive, activity that goes on through the screens. So yes, books should be prioritized. Why am I saying it as if they can be compared? Replace TV with books? Absolutely. They cannot be compared. There is no comparison. All right, so parents, let's jump right into it and look at 5. I always love to give you 5. So let's look at 5 kinds of books that your child should be reading, okay, or what you should focus on. All right, a guide to choosing the right kind of books that will develop your child's brain. Okay, number one, right? We need to, sorry about this, 1 second, please. All right. The five framework for selecting the right books. When you have, I have said already, when you have a budget for books for your children, now please create that. If you don't have one, create that. Even if it means buying 2 books in a month, if it means buying 2 books I mean, whatever the number of books. If you want your child to read 1 book per week, whatever it is, make sure you're introducing, okay? Make sure you're introducing a book per time that your child, is reading something new. And then after that, put it with a stack of other books that the child has. Let the child have a sense of, I am building or I am amassing. You know, the way you amass properties. There's not the way, you have people have a collection of cars, and things like that. Let your child have a collection of books. You are actually helping them build something and feel like they're actually building something. Sometimes you actually catch them, right, arranging their books and then feeling very proud of the books that they have. It's something to be proud of. All right. See, everything is engineering. What are you programming? What are you programming? What are you helping your child see as what is important? That's what your child will prioritize. That's what will be important to the child. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and hang around celebrities and see how their children are already, hang around a certain kind of people and see how their children are already prioritizing the designers and things like that they wear or that, people wear around them. So these are the things that they are big on because these are the things that the people in their environment are big on. So if you decide to prioritize books, and you decide to make big of books, then your children will make big of books. And what that means is that you are going to raise a lover of books and you're going to raise a lifelong learner. Very key. Number one, unbreakable rule, durability. When you are buying books for children, you want to make sure that you are buying books that are durable. So for your 0 to 3-year-olds, buy books, please. You have to buy books, So when they are infants, you want to buy books that the colors are not too many. Okay, you want to buy books that the colors are not too many so that the stimulation is not too much for the child. All right, so from white background, big letters, large pictures, all right, with some colors. The pictures now should have some colors, but not too many that it's too stimulating for your, for your infants. Okay, or if the books have got a lot of that, you may want to read it more, with the child, for the child, or to the child rather. Now, by the time they get to 2 and then 3, at this point, the child is already trying to interact with the book on their own. All right. So now is the time that you want to put the book in a place where your child can access the book on their own, because now the child is crawling around and all of that. And you would actually catch them sometimes with the book right on the floor and then fixed on it or flipping the pages. Your child is actually building or developing their fine motor skills. That whole activity of flipping is a lot of development that is going on there. And then the child is now trying to feel the book. The child is trying to make sense of the color. So now you have all those bold books that are, bold character with colors, and all of that. A lot of learning is going on right there for your child. So that's why at this point you want to buy books that the child does not easily tear, because the child would interact with that book. In fact, you want to also introduce, what do they call them? Those books that the ones that have the flips, the ones that what do you call them? The pop-up books. So you want to also introduce at 3-4, you want to introduce the pop-up books, right? So that creates some sense of, curiosity, excitement, adventure, for the child. So the child, and then the texture books. Sometimes you buy those books that actually have, have where the child can press and it makes some noise. There's the one where the child, can they're different texture. They're right there embedded in the books. You see different textures: soft, smooth, rough, and all of that. Learning at this point is highly sensorial. So you want to create, or you want to introduce books that the child can interact with. Okay, so it starts with the board books. They are hard, they are durable, they are not easily torn, and then you move to the ones that the child, can feel texture. Some of them the child can even smell, the child can press and make some noise and all of that. Because we're talking brain development, and that should be priority at this point when your child is reading books. So don't just go and buy any kind of books that is telling the same story. I mean, just telling random stories because they said they should buy a book. Oh, and then of course these are the books that are cheap. Don't just buy books for books' sake. Buy books because you are knowledgeable. Buy books now that you're knowledgeable, or now that you know. Then buy books that would actually be effective and resourceful to your child. All right, so these are the kind of books that you want to pay attention to, especially for your 0 to 3 year olds. Now, for your older children, I said, of course, goes to those kind of books. Let the letters be big, as they are reading. Let the letters be big. Let the pictures, I let the pictures correlate, so that the child is able to the child will create his own story out of those books. Okay, by the way, so your 3-year-old will read the book and create his own story. When you read picture reading, it does that a lot. Now you will also read these books to the child. So that's another thing. The book must have reading. We'll come to that. So easily read books, repetition, and rhymes, so that you read, he puffed and he huffed and he blew the house down. So that should repeat itself over and over and over in the book, such that when you get to that point, you hear the child goes, he puffs, he huffs, and he blew the house down. So you do that. So that's why sometimes you see parents say, oh, my child can read. Parents who don't really get it say, oh, my child can read. Oh, my child can read. He can read 4 books. By the time he was 2, he was reading 5 books. By the time he was there, the child wasn't reading. The child was mimicking, or the child was memorizing, repeating, because the books have been written so well that there's a lot of repetition, there's a lot of rhymes, there's a lot of, so the books got reading. So over time, the child, as you read with the child memorizes it, and the child can read the book from cover to cover without actually knowing how to read. And it's okay, it's beautiful. As I said, for your 0 to 3-year-old, the goal is not to read letters. The goal is not for them to blend. That's not the goal. The goal is many other things, right? That we've been talking about since this. Okay, so that's number 1. The book must be durable. Okay, number 2 is, as I said, you must have rhyme and rhythm. So you must have rhymes and rhythm, language engine. Okay, so the human brain is wired for music. The human brain is wired for music. So books that rhyme or repeat phrases will help the child to map out language structure fast. So very key that, at this stage, the kind of books must have, that which is, so that's how, so in my book, you go, look, Nini, look. So Nini is always pointing her friend, Bami is always pointing her friend, so something new in her, environment. So it's look, Nini, look. And then, there's a lot of repetition in the sky is blue and I am beautiful. This, that. So it helps the child, it gives the child that whole reading, and it helps with learning. Okay, books with simple, so I said books with simple rhymes, simple reading, e.g., brown bear, what do you see? You see that? Okay, what do you see? So every page, brown bear, and I talked about, okay, there's another one, the what's that story about the porridge? It looked in the pot, and it looked in a little, I can't remember, it's a long time, my children are much older, right? So it was something like the little bear did not eat it, the mommy bear did not eat it, the daddy bear did not eat it, or something like that. She went upstairs. The baby bear was not in his bed. Mommy bear was not in his bed. Things like that, just repeating So the books should rhyme, or should be something, should have rhyme and reading. You should make music to the ears as you read it to your child. With time the child begins to read it with you, and then you read it alone. I didn't stumble. I was actually looking through the library, and I saw our son's first book ever was Happy Birthday, Barnabas Bear. That's the title of this thing. And, so I brought it out and I showed him. I was like, guess what? I was like, Happy Birthday, Barnabas Bear. And my son and I went on to read that book together without opening a page. Happy Birthday, Barnabas Bear. Hi, Russell. We went on like that. It was really hilarious, and it was a lot of laughter. We can remember. He could even I was even missing it. I was missing some of it. He could read everything from, because it's somewhere there ingrained in his brain, just because of the music that it makes to the ears. So that's what the books should sound like at that stage. Okay, the mirror rule. Toddlers are trying to understand their daily world, so they need to see things they recognize. Okay, they need to see things that they recognize before they can understand fantasy. So when you are getting books, get books that are real. Get books that the things in the book relates to what your child's everyday life is. So you want your child, or you want to start your child with books that, books that they can relate to, books that has something to do with their environment. So that's why, part of why I started writing books. I wanted to write children's books for African children. I wanted to write books that your everyday child can relate to, because our children read a lot of books that, it's just fantasy. So sometimes we don't look at where our problems or the challenges that we have, today come from. If we actually go back to look at origin, we'll realize that our roots cause of the things, that we have. We'll realize that these children that were shouting, oh, Gen Z this, Gen Z that, the children that they don't want to do the, can we go back and look at, the things that they were even exposed to, or the ideas, or the things that formed or built their mindsets? Because if we look, we could see, it's possible to see that our children have lived in delusion, because all that they've been exposed to has been endless screens. And in those screens, there are a lot of things that are not their reality. But hey, that's the reality that the child has formed in his head. And so he lives out that reality, or lives those fantasies like it's his reality. So that's why, you see a 14-year-old boy or girl that is moving around thinking somewhere, somehow, right, that he is some pop star somewhere. Because somehow this is what he has seen around him in his environment, that he has pictured as what life should be. So the reality of what life is not one that he's familiar with. Because all he's seen in the shows that he watches, all he's seen on TV, all he's seen, in all of the endless screen games and all of that are a fallacy. They are all fantasy that are not real. So they can't live in reality, because they don't. Reality is not what they engage with every day. So yeah, that is part of why. That's part of why I decided to start writing, right? Especially for this age of children, right? So that we can have children relate to the things that are their reality. So yes, the child is trying to understand the world around him. So the first books that your children should read should be books that, that depicts their reality. Books that they can relate to, the reality of their life, and what they see in the book kinds of, they look alike, and the child, can connect with the book. It's not abstract to the child. So books showing real eating, real sleeping, brushing teeth, playing with blocks, or feeling happy and sad, and all of that, as opposed to books that show someone living on top of a tree, or someone living somewhere in a tower, someone that has hair that is round, all of those things. Right. So sometimes it gets a bit confusing, and that's why a lot of our children live in Lala world, because what they read and their reality do not match. Okay. Very, very key. Number 4 is the point and say rule. Never buy books where the child just sits like a statue and read. The book must be engaged in. The book must trigger, or the book must involve the child and get your child, especially for your 0 to 3 year old now, and get the child right to live their own reality or engage with the books basically. So very important, especially for this age of children, and even for your 5 6 year olds, right? The book should prompt them to do something. The book should be the reason. Have you seen a child who finished watching a book, reading a book or something like that, that they connect to, and the next thing you see them in your kitchen trying to recreate what it is that they have read or what it is that they have learned? So that's where it is. The book should invite the child, right? The right books should invite the child to, execute or to practice what it is that they have read in the books. All right. So books with flaps that can lift. I talked about that. Okay. So what kind of books do you buy? Books with flaps that can lift, texture that can touch, or large pictures. I talked about that already. Number 5, the parent sanity. All right, so your child will ask you to read their favorite book 1,000 times. Okay, all right. So if the story is annoying or boring to you, you will keep skipping it and you will not like to read. So read books, right, that will not frustrate you, or buy them books that will not frustrate you as well. So choose books with beautiful, clean illustration and messages. I always say that. So when people ask me what kind of books should I buy for my child, what kind of book is good and all of that, many times I don't recommend books per se, except in our program, the Mastermind Circle. So I run a program, a mentorship program for young children between ages 4 and 10. Right. Now, your values show in the kind of books that you buy, all right, or that you read. Now, you cannot separate your values from, when you're buying books for your children. So don't buy books that do not align with your values. Don't buy, for instance, you share a particular belief when it comes to sexual orientation, and all of that. So no, you don't want to be the one to buy, a book for your child. Sorry. So you don't want to be the one to buy a book, for your child that will confuse your child about orientations. You don't want to be the one to buy that. So you want to make sure you look at the book and the book is not going to the left while you are going to the right. Very key. Very key. Now, you want to buy books for your child that align with what you believe. You want to buy books that will promote or will enhance or reiterate or, reinforce what it is that you are already teaching your child. Very key. You don't want to buy books for your child that is probably talking about, someone was talking about, I saw it online. I can't remember the real story, but something about the girl, someone stopped a sharp object or something like that in the dog's eye. Some very funny thing like that. Basically, it was violence against animal, and all of that. It was something creepy. Do you get? And it was right there in a book that a child got from school. So very important that, whatever book aligns. For example, my children don't read a certain kind of book. My children don't read really very wimpy kind of books that is just about, there are some of those books, right, that would actually curse, There are books that curse, they curse them, and there's a lot of cursing, there's a lot of you fool when you drop that, all really a lot of wimpiness and all of that. We don't do that. Now, you could do that because you don't have a problem with that. So that's why I said your values. So I don't allow my children read books that are a lot of that has a lot of garbage. If you're going to spend your time reading, right? If you're going to spend your time reading a book because you want you want to build yourself, then that's not where you should be reading things that things that are not sensible, basically. So that's not where you should be reading things that will mess with your mind generally. So basically, so very important that your values are incorporated, when you think of what choice of books to get for your children. All right. So your sanity, very important. Your values, very important. So when you choose books with, as I said, beautiful illustrations, books that you can relate to, that are aligned with your values and all of that. Okay. Now, some parents will complain, my children don't like to read, my children don't like to see books and all of that. And I say to them, I want to say to you also, if you had a child that has struggled with reading for the longest, now reading is a learned skill. You can actually teach your child to enjoy books. You can actually teach your child to read books. You can actually cultivate or help your child cultivate a love for reading. How do you do this? You do this by introducing reading and books in a fun way. Okay, you do this by finding out the things that your child is interested in. What is your child interested in? Try to get them books that would actually expose them to that thing that they're interested in a positive way. Yeah. Or that will help them see why that thing that they're interested in, is not the best for them. You have books that can answer practically every question. So if you want to talk about something you want, especially for your older children, your 10, 12-year-olds, you want them to see a perspective, or you want them to understand something from a different perspective, get a book right about that thing, read it together and review the book together. So the book has a way of speaking about the subject without any bias. So that way, when you're reviewing the book together, you're reviewing the book as the author's perspective. And the author's perspective can give rise to other perspective without it sounding as if you're trying to force your child to do a particular thing, especially when they start growing older and they begin to have a sense of autonomy and they want to argue out everything. So a book is a good way to actually shift mindset in your child. So that's why you need to get them to love and enjoy books right now. You need to get them to appreciate books right now, so that when that time comes that you're going to be using books to, shift mindset, it's not a chore, because now your child already loves to read books. So it's easy for us to read a book together. I remember when, I wanted my son to start reading financial books, right? We had to read them together. We read Rich Dad, Poor Dad together when he was in year 6 going into year 7. Year 6, year 7. We finished when he was in year 7. But it was because there was already a window, or there was already that line where books was a thing. So we're able to read on our drive to school. We'll read a part of the chapter, we will talk about it. So it became a routine. As we get into the car, the next thing is picking the book from, the book rack right there. Is picking it out and reading already, and we could talk about it. It so happened that even when I'm not the one taking him or getting him from school and it's daddy, the routine continues. Okay, daddy, we are on page this. I'm going to read it out and you can share with me your perspective. It was such a beautiful way of sharing, books and learning about deep things, especially with your preteens and your teenagers. Amazing. amazing. But you have to build and develop that culture starting right now. So we have a program that we run for this purpose, all right, to help cultivate a love for reading, because you want to catch them young. You want to start this culture as early as possible. And I say, if you want to introduce something, you want something that will stick, a good thing to do is be on that thing consistently for at least 21 days. Okay, that's what the experts say. If you want to change your habits, stay on the positive habit for over 21 days consistently. So we introduced the 30 days book challenge. All right, and that's for us to help convert many children into book lovers. If I tell you the number of children, the number of families that we have helped through the book challenge for the children to start loving books, you will not believe it. Every year we run this challenge and we have hundreds of people join this challenge, and we have families that, it's a great way to bond with your children. It's not just reading, that's the thing. It's fun activities and book challenge. So it's a lot of creativity. We do a lot of exploration, creative things. I mean, it's everything. It's like any challenge that you know. For those who have never taken this challenge, you realize nothing like any other reading challenge that you know. It's going to build the children, it's going to get all of you